Hello everyone. Today we are going to take a look at what makes up a fictional story. So we will be looking at story elements during today's lesson. What you will need for a successful lesson will be a pencil and the handout that you've been given with the puzzle pieces that lay out our story elements. Our focus for today is identifying fictional story elements, so our focus is going to be on fictional or pretend stories.
Test 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3.
What I want you to be thinking about throughout this lesson is how can I determine the different pieces that make up a story? Where do authors draw their inspiration? So what are they using to help them create a story that's interesting for people? And how can I apply my knowledge of story elements to write a story? So after we've learned about story elements and determined what makes up a fictional story, you will actually be applying this skill to writing your own story. Our steps are watching the video presentation on story elements, taking notes on the presentation, and making sure that you stop the video as needed to write down and think about the important information. The great thing about a video presentation is that you can stop and start it as you need and watch it as many times as necessary. So let's get started. There are several types of fictional stories that we will be looking at throughout the year, so it's important to know the differences between all of them. So on the back of your story element sheet, flip it over to the blank side, and we're going to take some notes on the types of fictional stories. The first type of fictional story that we are going to make note of is what we call novels. And in a novel, they are considered long works of fiction. When you guys think about novels, you probably think about chapter books. A little bit shorter than novels are called novellas. A novella is a short story. They're longer than short stories, but shorter than novels. And the third one that we're going to make note of are short stories. Short stories are brief or short works of fiction. Usually in a short story, there's only one problem being addressed. Whereas in a novella or a novel, you might have more than one problem being addressed. You are probably most familiar with realistic fiction. So pretend stories that actually could happen. There are other genres that fall under fiction, the umbrella of fiction, including fantasy, horror, mystery, historical fiction, which is a pretend story but may have some events from real history. So these are the three that we will address throughout the year: novels, novellas, and short stories. So the question is, what goes into making up a fictional story? That's where your puzzle piece sheet comes in. So you have this page out. It's broken up into 6 sections. This is where we're going to take notes on each of these types, these elements, and we're going to identify a definition for each one of them. So in the first box where it says story elements, we need a definition for what story elements are. So put this in your very first puzzle piece. So you're filling in this box right here. here's your definition. Story elements are the pieces or parts that make up a story. Your next box, right in the middle, says characters. Well, if we think back to our previous conversation about characters, we already have a definition. Your definition for characters are the people or animals who are important to the story. Moving on to our third box, we have setting. Most frequently, when people think about setting, they think about where a story takes place. We need to add to that, so not only are we including where a story takes place, but when. So our definition is the time and location a story takes place. And we often refer to this as where and when. Our fourth box is really what gets our story going here. It is a problem. So a problem is the main issue or struggle that the characters are up against. And as we move forward in class, this will often be referred to as conflict. So this word conflict is going to be very important in future discussions. After our characters have a problem, there are some things that happen in the story before we can come up with a solution. So if you notice, the key events are what's holding our problem and solution together. So our key events are important events or actions that occur during the story. Which of course eventually leads to a solution, which is the way that the characters solve the problem. So as we are reading our short story over the next several days, you are going to be looking for the characters, setting, problem, key events, and solution that are making up our story. What are the important pieces that create this story?